Last time on 3D-Vanias, pretty good, okay, freaking amazing. Now on to part 2. For those wondering what my decided lack of enthusiasm was all about for the first part, Pepperdog mandated that we play all entries of Castlevania, starting with the N64. As such, I had to play a lot of Castlevania. A lot. I still haven't played Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate yet, so that may get its own video. Who knows at this point. My enthusiasm for the series has been worn down, since these last two games we're going to cover today will represent the 2 billionth and 2 billion and first games in the series. And then we're done. For good. So there had better be some good stuff in here. These reviews ship with spoilers, so if you want to skip past plot details, I'll put some time codes in the comments so you can click past them when the plot section starts. Let's just stampede right into Lords of Shadow. Alright, on to development. Now, we normally don't talk about game development on this series because, well, it's really not all that notable. However, it is worth noting here that the Lords of Shadow games were not designed by Konami exclusively. This is a first for the series. They were instead developed by Kojima Productions. Yeah, that Kojima. And the brunt of the work was taken on by Mercury Steam, a Spanish dev team. That being a dev team in Spain. I would attribute the different feel of these games to this sole fact, well, that and Konami outright wanting a different feel anyway. The original pitch for the game was to remake the original Castlevania. You know, the one on the Nintendo from 1986. Again. Thankfully, that didn't happen. The reboot we got was actually way better. This release almost didn't happen. Producer David Cox from Mercury Steam had to grovel to the senior execs at Konami, which is where Kojima offered to pitch in with his production company. So, interesting side note there. Graphics. Bear in mind, I'm doing these reviews based on the Xbox 360 version of the game. These versions offer no smoothing, anti-aliasing, or resolution selection of any kind. The PC version does. But these environments are beautiful. The woods are woodsy, I guess. The small towns look fantastic. This castle architecture, though, is a little close to J.R.R. Tolkien territory. I mean, for real, they could have just called it Lord of the Shadows and be perfectly okay. And the ledges you need to grab onto for climbing sections are portrayed in a pretty obvious manner. You know, just in case you're half blind like me and need a nice glowing edge to focus your eye on. The character designs are very grim, very dark. The dev team has gone on record by saying some of the previous designs, some of Konami's designs for previous entries, are boyish in nature. I have no idea where they could have gotten that at all. Just none. And they wanted a darker feel this time for the characters. And they did this with startling efficiency. All these characters seem pretty Del Toro-ish. Gabriel's design especially has more testosterone than the entire cast of 6th generation characters combined. Going on to the audio. Sound design is great. Monsters roaring is on par with the designs. Whip cracks are satisfying. Winds are howling. Creaking platforms. All manners of Castlevania sound design are here. But can we just take a minute to highlight the music composer here? The music composer is not Michiru from the last Castlevania games. No. Actually, the composer's name is none other than Oscar Araujo. Is that how you're supposed to pronounce it? Araujo? My Spanish is terrible. And the music is phenomenal. Great music. I can understand why it won Best Soundtrack of the Year in 2010. He said he gleaned a little inspiration from the classic games, and it shows. The other power play with this game's audio is the ridiculous voice talent that they got. Our lead man is voiced by none other than Robert Carlyle. I mean, you know Robert Carlyle. T2 Trainspotting, The World Is Not Enough, Marooned, the video short, I don't think it's a movie, and BBC's War of the Worlds miniseries. He's in that too. He does a more than competent job of being the archetypical hero's voice. It's very deep, very grovelly, all that good stuff.
Where are we? What is this place? Who are you? And why do you help? No. I will take the three powers and unite them.
Gabriel, the protagonist, was going to be voiced by none other than Gerard Butler. But I think he was working on Gamers at the time. You know, the movie Gamers. So, good on him for choosing that over this. But hold on to your butts, ladies and gentlemen. The real star of the show here is none other than Patrick Stewart. You know Patrick Stewart. Safe House, The Emoji Movie, Frasier, Dad Savage, The Canterville Ghost, Masterminds, Conspiracy Theory. Yes, that Patrick Stewart. He does a phenomenal narration job, but he also has a twist that we'll have to talk about later.
Yet hope remains in the hearts of the people.
This here is where the complaints start, is with gameplay. This game feels a lot like a distillation of other games. Chopped up, put it in the stew, put it in the blender. It's like the multivitamin of video games. There's a little bit Shadows of the Colossus, a little bit Gods of War, a little bit Assassin's Creed, and a little bit Castlevania. With this blend of all these awesome games, it's no wonder why it's the best-selling Castlevania title ever. It really is, I looked it up. There's an ability leveling system here that's been featured in a multitude of other games, a system like this, but it's implemented in a way that feels natural, unlike some other games. It also involves health and magic increases by collecting these corresponding colored shards. Level design can feel a bit convoluted at times, but it's kind of canceled out by not absolutely needing to backtrack 100%. If you want to be the best Gabriel you can be, though, you have to backtrack. You gotta backtrack to get all the power-ups. And, oh god, not the QTEs! Why do you keep coming back to my life in ways that I don't want, late 2000s? Why? Alright, it is time for the plot synopsis, so I will give you a second to go down to the comments and click the time code in which you can skip past this if you don't want to be spoiled. So we start off by Patrick Stewart spoon-feeding us some intro.
The world is
Expo. Intro Expo.
Hope remains in the
I mean, what else can I say? It's a phenomenal way to start the game off.
Lives, never knowing
Okay,
forces
well,
that can change our
we're
destiny.
actually starting off in a village that are forced to exile because the super powerful Wolverines keep bothering them. Yes. Phenomenal way to start the plot off. This town functions as a combat tutorial, introducing you to the combat basics of the game. One of these combat basics is the dreaded QTE. You already heard my thoughts on that. This monster/boss Wolverine is a lot to get used to at first, and you kind of need to get used to them since they become a regular enemy later in the game. What else can I say but Castlevania trope +1. We're keeping track here too, I'll tell you why later. Before leaving town, we find out the reason Gabriel is going to this quest. It has something to do with a dead love. We get to find out more about this later, but first, let's jump on this spirit horse.
I hear you seek the guardian of the lake.
What is this? Bridge to Terabithia or something? It is during this stage that we are introduced to the blocking mechanic. It's not Dark Souls parrying level, but I wound up relying on rolling out of the way more than just directly blocking attacks later in the game. Next up, combat with some rather explosive goblins. They like to ready bombs and throw them at you, but you can throw the bombs back at them before they explode. These bombs are also used for solving a handful of puzzles. We're also introduced to the zombies that chill in this lake, I guess. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with a lot of these further in the game. At the end of the path, in a graveyard, we find an even bigger Wolverine. Castlevania trope +1. This Wolverine has a ground pound and somehow moves faster despite being bigger. That makes a lot of sense. This boss fight is also an early example of a fundamental flaw in the game: how fast the bosses actually move. On average, these character bosses move so fast that you don't have time to do all the cool strong moves that you learn later. So all that great animation work that the team did is completely useless. Oh, god damn it. Oh, hey, look! I was 1 frame too late on that last QTE prompt. Now the game is gonna punish me for it. Finally, after the graveyard, we can continue onto some classic Castlevania side-scrolling. Unexpected Castlevania trope +1, especially in a 3D Castlevania game. But anyway, more pathways to traverse. We need to collect these runes along the way to solve a puzzle at the end of the path. The first of many, since Konami loves their puzzles. This, oddly enough, is not the hardest puzzle of the game, but it's also not the easiest. They straight up give you the answer if you find all the runes. After this, we are introduced to the Guardian of the Lake of Oblivion.
Where the living can communicate with the dead.
Woo! He's here to inform us that we have a puzzle to solve to get to our dead wife.
What is happening?
I did this based on simple intuition. Evidently, the barrier to talk to the dead is actually quite low. The game crosses into the Silent Hill universe by having Gabriel suffer a premonition of killing his wife. It's part of the test, though, so you're hired. Whatever. Graduating on to the next chapter, we start with this rather colossal golem boss. Look, if I wanted to play Shadow of the Colossus, I would play Shadow of the Colossus. I guess since it's a giant golem, you would kind of expect this. But the boss fight is extremely clunky. The timing of all these things feels a little strange, and it all relies on QTEs. After this boss fight, Gabriel is visited by Marie, who tells him that she receives some vague notion of a prophecy. But that's it. I had a prophecy. But then, we are introduced to Patrick Stewart's character, Zobek. Yes, the same fellow that was writing the book that was read to you during the loading screens. Now that is world building. You get to play with that guy in the game. Fantastic. He dispels knowledge of the 3 sub-bosses you have to fight.
It will allow you to absorb spirit.
He also gives us the power of light magic. Light magic is used to enhance your whip and replenish health during combat. Which it all kind of makes sense now that I'm thinking back on it, because Brotherhood of Light, light magic, Brotherhood of Light, light magic. Anyway. After some more pathing, we run into yet another big Wolverine. More pathing, and then we run onto our first big spider. Yep, there's more of that classic Castlevania influence. Castlevania trope +1. We silk our way through to our second cross upgrade. Now it has a spiked chain. This spiked chain is only useful for pulling down giant rock totems, and very specific ones. It actually does no additional damage to enemies. I mean, those minions are tough. And, I'm sorry I forgot about the first whip upgrade. But anyway, here we see Gabriel going through some ancient ruins of the city of Agiatha, something. I just wanted to take a second and highlight this area in particular. One of my favorite stages of the game. I mean, from a level design standpoint, it's your average Lords of Shadow game, but I like how it looks. This is like one of my favorite levels to look at. In the middle of the stage, though, we run into this Hyper Wolverine. This thing is ruthless, man. It's really fast, it has a little bit of a better ground pound reach, and spends a lot of time dodging your attacks. It's the first time I had to prioritize dodging more than anything else, which means this fight takes forever. Because you're taking time to dodge, you're barely getting an attack. A little bit after this Hyper Wolverine fight, though, we meet the mysterious ninja lady. More on her later, as she just kind of summons something and then leaves. After more ruins exploration, we find out more about the mysterious ninja lady. The second big spider you run into is a mount that moves pretty quickly, has some awesome lunge attacks, and can make bridges with spider webs. Also, as another opportunity to throw in those lovely QTEs, it can spray Gabriel with webs. That's fantastic. Her name is Claudia, and she will lead us to the first Lord of Shadow through this dark dungeon. Telepathic communication is a great way to avoid lip sync. At the dungeon's door, we get introduced to the Dark Crystal Shards. Collecting 4 of these will piece together a Dark Crystal. The first one is used to open a door, but their future uses include solving more puzzles and summoning a really powerful beast that helps you with boss fights. It's not enough to just put a crystal in and unlock a door, though. There's another component to the puzzle. Though I've always been a big fan of directing light. I don't know why. Oh boy! We get to fight the Stone Titan again! After beating the Stone Titan, again, we find out that we have to sacrifice Claudia to gain shadow magic. Big Daddy Dark Knight doesn't like this too much either. This guy is pretty tough. It was very down to the wire for me. But we do get something very, very rewarding from this boss fight. The completely original, never before done Dark Gauntlet. Yes, a Dark Gauntlet. Questing our way through the temple, we meet up with our first Lord of Shadow, Dark Lord of the Lycans. He goes through the entire notion of how Lords of Shadow came to be.
Hear me. Many centuries ago, 3 great warriors founded the Brotherhood of Light, the order to which you belong. Their sole purpose was to serve God and defeat the devil. For decades, the founders fought fiercely against the spawns of Satan, and finally tipped the equilibrium in God's favor. Such was their commitment to the crusade, that their studies in holy enlightenment led them to 3 sacred places, where the power of God converged with such intensity that it forged a bridge between the spiritual The Founders used that power to purify themselves, abandoning their human forms and transforming them into spiritual beings whose power was second only to gods.
You tell me nothing that I did not already know, beast.
Little did they realize that what they left behind were not their carcasses devoid of souls, but instead the dark sides of themselves. Don't you see? That is how we came to be. We, who you call the Lords of Shadow.
He fights quite valiantly too, but is no match for the Dark Crystal, which erodes away about a quarter of his health. Not bad.
Is this the best?
A sequence of well-timed dodges and one-time hits and he was down. But wait. There's a phase 2? Oh, of course there is. Castlevania Trope +1. This phase is rough. I had to dial down the difficulty to finish. After which we get a QTE finisher. Ah, god damn it, one frame late again. What does this add to the boss fight? For real. They checkpoint you just before the beginning of the QTE, so if you lose, you just have to do the sequence all over again. What value does it add?
Encased, my love.
Anyway, after some encouraging words from Marie, we get some cool Latin from Robert Carlyle.
Oblivion. Sempiternum. Daemonis.
Eternal oblivion for a demon. Thank you, Internet. I have no idea what the first word of Latin. But Latin is such a dark and mysterious language. So, we also get these cool boots that allow the player to sprint. Finally, sprinting. Oh good, now Talon from 2006's Prey is here to transport us to the next chapter. Thanks, Talon. We kick off this next chapter by fighting this giant beast thing. This fight actually acts like a puzzle. I'm pretty sure I just missed the hint, but for a solid 10 to 15 minutes, I thought you just had to get his health bar down to 0. But there's an additional component to the fight. You see that spiked stone up there? You're supposed to pull him down into the spike. Nothing told me, you know. Admitted me enough though, this is the first thing I had to look up on the internet. Climbing our way through the top of the elf castle brings us on to the next boss fight. Quoth the Raven. God damn it! This is the most annoying QTE sequence in the game. You're supposed to catch the raven's eggs with the right trigger, and then spin the left stick around to throw the eggs back at it. However, the left stick rotation is so quick, you barely have time to catch on to what's going on. It doesn't help that the QTE sequence actually goes faster than what's going on in the screen. That doesn't help at all. After Gabriel's first viewing of Birdemic, we get introduced to the Chupacabras. Oh lord, the Chupacabras. These things are here to just make your life a living hell. They pose no threat to your life, but they steal all of your relics and magic powers. You have to choke them out though to continue, which is more than satisfying. I love choking these guys out. Shortly after that, we meet up with Zobak again. He was unable to reach this random village in time, and he was expecting to meet up with some demons here. Since they said they would be back, I guess.
What happened here?
I'll send you straight back to hell! You motherfuckers are gonna kill all my lilies!
The reason I kept letting go of the statue here is because I thought you had to hold on to the right trigger while pressing X. But as it turns out, I didn't need to. After this, we run into our first round of vampires. Let me tell you, these are the most unique vampires I've ever seen. Unique is probably the right word for it. This puzzle is pretty cool. It involves moving a sigil to a fenced-off area of the room, and then running through the portal to get to it. So many power-ups here. Ah yeah, a library. Another Castlevania trope +1. This puzzle took some brain work. You have to align the statues with the mirrors to bounce light into a receptacle on the other end of this weirdly shaped library. Pretty awesome puzzle. After ascending the highest tower, we run into the Abbot Doran, a holy man that has become incredibly selfish and has hogged the evil artifact all to himself. And that's it for him. After quite a long quest later, we run into the Sedge Maze. Because the one from the N64 days was so awesome, right? The next corridor had me going for a bit. And as I was fighting these vampires, I forgot the key thing that works against them. Light. So I pulled down the curtains. Way too late. You actually need the light from the curtains to fill a lens at the end of the corridor, though, so there you go. Now, this next room is where things get interesting. A demon girl challenges you to a game of chess. Only it's a little more involved than chess. This game is called Vampire War Game. I'll tell you, if Konami separated out this section and put it on the Xbox Live Arcade and charged like $5 for it, I would have gotten it. This is probably the best part of the game so far, is the minigame. Up next, after a few hallways, is the Butcher. Nothing special here, just smack him until he's dead. After a lot of pathing and some aggravating puzzle solving, we get to our next spot, Tesla's Lab. That's not the real name of the level, but that's what I'm going to call it. This spot is pretty cool, home to some of the best puzzles in the game, and that cool, on the cusp of industrial age aesthetic. Having to ground pound these buttons at this weird angle, though, is an exercise in frustration. We also get probably the coolest boss of the game, the Mechanical Monstrosity. This puzzle relies on your sprinting ability, which I honestly forgot I had. After that, the kid that challenged us to a game of Vampire War Game wants us to play with her toys. These unholy mishmashes of flesh and fabric. I really wasn't in a playful mood that time. After breaking all her toys, we get a visit from the wife, who tells us to keep playing the game. Fighting our way through the toughest skeleton warriors I've ever seen, we finally get to the outer walls of the castle. Yes, finally, a castle in Castlevania. After the outer wall, we advance on to the Clockwork Tower. Castlevania trope +1 again. Man, this really must be a Castlevania game. All the traditional elements of a good Clockwork Tower design are here. There are platforms, both stationary and moving, rotating gears, rhythmic noises. The only thing they didn't do here was stuff it to the gills with enemies. Up on top, we meet Olrox. Oh yeah, Olrox, he barely gets enough attention. Which is weird because he got his own quarters in Symphony of the Night. Anyway, after we beat him, Gabriel has to tilt this blood puzzle to get all 5 of the pools there full of blood. This puzzle was balls. When you got the path right, the time tolerances to get the blood to the pools were so thin, you needed dental floss to cut it. If you let the blood slip down the wrong path for even a few milliseconds, it was game over. But fortunately, you don't have to refill all the blood pools, just the one you were working on, so the game has a little bit of mercy. But finally, after solving that puzzle, we get placed at the bottom of the final set of stairs, and we ascend our way to the top. Castlevania trope +1. It was here we meet Camilla, Queen of the Vampires.
I am told that you are looking for me.
Most of the fight is crushing the vampires that she summons. Her entire second form fight is a QTE sequence. Brilliant, I say. After she's done, we get to go through this land of burnt and charred remains to... Oh no, not you again. No. Anyway, we go through this old witch's house. Baba's house. Her name is Baba.
Baba knows the path.
She then tells us to fetch 3 keys so we can find the blue rose hidden inside her music box. So then she could help Gabriel.
Papa wants to be young and
The most ornate music box I've ever heard of. It needs 3 keys just to be unlocked. So that means 2 fetch quests. That is a harsh bargain, but I guess we got no choice. This music box really is something special. Basically, you have to grab these gemstones in a certain sequence and then arrange them in a different sequence to get to where the blue rose is. You're supposed to, I guess, compete the old witch's song or something, or whatever. It took me 45 minutes to do this puzzle, even with the help of the internet. And admittedly enough, I had my mind focused on other things, but still. 45 minutes to do a puzzle. This next level really is something special, though. This is where we start turning into ethereal level design here. This entire level is composed of a murky sea and a giant collection of bones. And that's it. This boss fight was aight.
Let's see how
The removal and restoration of magic throughout the fight was pretty awesome to go through. Having to swap to the opposite magic that the boss is using at the time to do more damage was pretty cool too. Not a bad concept. Plus, we just chugged our Red Bull, and we got wings at the end of the fight. After our lava dark crystal maze, we get to fight the Silent Hill reject model. We vanquish him by QTE-ing him into the furnace. Oh look! It's another one that I failed the first time. This part here brought back some Metroid vibes, only the lava rises way, way, way slower. Now we're cooking with ethereal, baby. This level here is literally just a bunch of rocks floating in a sunlit void. It consists of one of the cooler puzzles I've seen in video games, period, where you have to set a calendar to a certain astrological sign, day, and moon phase. I needed help remembering what symbol represented Virgo, but the moon phase and day was just guessing within the limited scope that the in-game hint gives you. The sealed door puzzle is kind of a pain too. Basically how it works is, each colored stone represents a direction on the grid on the gate, and it's your job to trace out the seal that's holding the gate closed. First I thought I had to walk on the right stones. When I read the in-game hint, it told me that each color corresponded to a direction on the gate, but to abstract it, they don't tell you what color goes what direction. This leaves you just guessing to figure it out what goes where, and then you need to figure out how to activate the stones. That requires a ground pound. I wound up having to look up the answer online and still had difficulty inputting the right sequence of squares because of having to aim the freaking ground pound. This angle is really annoying. Here's the real joint though. The warp you need to get to is blocked by this spiked rusted gate. To open it, you have to activate 2 green orbs. One is accessed by going through this series of floating platforms, just floating up and down, side to side, whatever. And the other is up this giant rock with all these conveniently placed edges. Now we come to the coolest boss fight of the game. This Stone Titan Dragon. I knocked out the first phase with a Dark Crystal because he's incredibly weak to Dark Crystals. It did take me a couple of minutes though to recognize the glowing scale on the underbelly that you're supposed to grab onto with the whip. Right trigger. You go through the most intense Shadow of the Colossus fight here. Drive the whip through the rune in his mouth and then assemble the Mask of God. In the final hour, we discover the twist! Patrick Stewart is evil! Evil! Zobek is the Lord of the Dead, or at least was possessed by the mask. He made you kill Claudia and your wife.
You are the Lord
And
of the
it's time to get pit. Wait a minute.
Is now mine. No! No!
Another twist! Zobek was a tool of Satan, I think? Death? Shaft? Yeah, Satan.
Forever.
So Gabriel must fight
Don't you
Satan
see?
after getting some
You must
encouragement
grant him
from
the power
Murray.
to go back.
I know this is an absolute shocker to everybody, but this is the hardest boss fight of the game. Blew my mind, right? The tricks you learned in the last boss fight are important here. Always use the opposite magic that he's using. The first set of... and later in the boss fight you have these magic barriers. The idea is to activate the opposite magic that the barrier is set for. This first sequence of magic barriers isn't that bad, but this second sequence is totally random and totally ridiculous. This second set of magic shields is what makes this boss fight total BS. At the end of the game, we learn that the mask allows the wearer to see through God's eyes. Gabriel also gets wrecked when Marie said she would rather stay dead instead of coming back to the living realm with him.
It is my time. The light is calling. I'm not afraid.
Please, stay with me.
It's beautiful, Gabriel. So beautiful.
Ouch. I am the demon? Come on now. At least we get this thing knotted up nice and properly. And holy crap, the game takes place in the Universal Dark Universe. Nice. Onward, the Lords of Shadow 2. With the graphics, the same rules apply here, only I think they tried to do this adaptive resolution thing even on the Xbox 360 to maintain 30 frames per second at all times, which was quoted as being perfectly acceptable. Anyway, the level design, it has more of an open world feel, though I wouldn't exactly call the game open world. Basically, all these districts are connected. Like, there's one wall separating each of these districts, and they try to do their best to make the flow, also loading screen, seamless, a la Symphony of the Night. I can appreciate this being a player of Fable, where each little map may be miles apart. It's more immersive to have your worlds kind of closer together in one cohesive sequence. The visual level design can be simply put in one sentence. Well, it's either 1547 or it's not. If you ask me, the handful of levels that take place in the buildings that were obviously built during the Middle Ages detracts somewhat from the game. While this game does satisfy my want for a modern Castlevania game, they should have just ramped it up to 11 and put everybody but Dracul in a suit and have all this slick modern architecture a la Deus Ex. It is lured away, though, being that the people built this city right on top of the remains of Dracula's destroyed castle. So, some of the old chambers were preserved because reasons. Climbing is more focused on points and less focused on edges, which I like better because points stand out more in a 3D environment. And if you ever get lost or you're clearly not paying attention or you're half blind or whatever, they give you a button to push to literally show you the path you have to go. Very noob friendly. So on the character design, all the plot characters look roughly the same as they did in Lords of Shadow, because they all never age. Patrick Stewart looks especially stunning in this suit. I mean, look at him. The monsters, though, are definitely more grotesque than the last game. Almost as if Del Toro started working on monsters for Silent Hill. And, did I mention the blood? Because there's a lot of blood. And then we have to go on to the controllable versus fixed camera debate. In the first Lords of Shadow game, the camera was placed in fixed positions in the level, like Lament of Innocence. Though much more forgiving in Lords of Shadow, this still makes judging jump distances a pain in the ass. Also, putting edges or whip points at the edge of the screen really doesn't help matters all that much. Lords of Shadow 2 features a controllable camera like Curse of Darkness. This to me is infinitely better. It allows the player to better soak in the environment, makes judging distances so much better. And the thing of it is I don't even remember doing anything with the right analog stick in the first Lords of Shadow, outside of pressing it down to sponge up demon magic. So why wasn't that camera free as well? But anyway. On the audio, a lot more gurgling and blood sound effects in this to complement the extra visual blood, so can't complain there. The whip sounds less awesome than the first game, but this is because you're actually not even using an actual whip. The voice acting, Robert Carlyle and Patrick Stewart are awesome voice actors again as usual.
Now receive your just reward for your disloyalty, betrayer!
He is mine.
Now let's get some ground rules here. You're the maid, I'm the master. Your job is to clean my house, cook my food, and wash my shorts.
And Jason Isaacs of Black Hawk Down, Harry Potter, and Event Horizon fame does a bang-up job of voicing Alucard, son of Dracula.
What if there was a way to destroy their evil forever? To free mankind from tyranny? If they believed you dead, they would come out into the light once more, would they not? This is the Crusagram.
Oscar does just as good a job here as he did with the first Lords of Shadow in regards to the soundtrack. With the gameplay pretty similar to the first one, although it doesn't exactly feel like just a blend of other games' mechanics. It kind of feels like its own thing. There are a lot less colossi, a lot less of them, and there are way less QTEs. As a matter of fact, I didn't run into a single QTE in the game. I think they automated those out in like a patch or something, because it seemed like there were parts of the game that had a QTE first. So maybe they patched them out, or maybe they patched them out during development, and you never got to play it. I didn't get to play this game at launch, so who knows. The pacing in general is also a bit faster here, so that's nice. And can I say the awesomeness of the controllable camera again? Because I just did. Alright, going on to the plot. So again, check that comments section if you don't want the plot spoiled. Right, so we kick off after the events of Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate. Being that game is a side-scroller, it's not going to be covered here. Anyway, these soldiers are barging into Dracul's chamber. Yes, it's not Dracula, it's Dracul, remember this. During this combat, we relearn our moves and inherit both forms of magic. No need for story progression this time. Although now, the blue magic is called Void Magic, and the red magic is called Chaos Magic. Different than the first game. After beating them, we have to parkour our way out the door because they blew up the hallway that leads outside.
What is a man? But a miserable pile of secrets.
We find out that there's this giant mechanical colossus just outside our chamber. This fight here already beats the golem from the first game. If we're gonna have these colossi, at least make them bigger and with varying sections. This fight took me about 20 minutes to complete. I mean, look at all the mount points and rivets holding this giant steampunk thing together. After popping out all the rivets, we meet up with the golden-clad guardian himself and have a duel. After fighting with the paladin, we get filled in on Dracul's hatred for the Brother of Light, you know, just in case you didn't play the first game. We also get filled in on the events of Lords of Shadow Mirrors of Fate, just in case you didn't play that game either. Which, from what I understand, is a pretty good chance. Several hundred years later, Dracul is awakened by a nightmare, I guess? Ah, Lords of Shadow. We make our way to street level and have a look around. Right here is where I had Aqualung playing in my head the entire time. We follow this young boy down the hallway, because that can only lead to good things with no implications.
You want my people!
In this alleyway, we get our butt kicked, but we're kind of supposed to. Not a big fan of that in the plot, but hey, whatever. Luckily, Zobek's guard was right here just to kick that demon's ass in time, so, you know, there you go. During this first-person cutscene, we find out why Dracul was looking a little sick. He was dehydrated, he was sleeping for centuries, and he needed more blood. So when we wake up a little later, our boy Zobek steps in. Aw, yeah, we didn't have to wait that long to hear Patrick Stewart's voice in this one either. Nice.
It pleases me to see you recovered, old friend.
Zobek fills us in on Satan's human offspring called acolytes.
Your old weapon.
Since Dracul slept for about 500 years, his muscles and skills went a little atrophic, I guess? The acolytes are no longer afraid of Dracul. They are counting on him to not build himself back up. Alright, it's time for me to be that guy here. Just pause the review. Why call the game Lords of Shadow when there are not going to be any Lords of Shadow? If you keep the design language of the artwork the same, we could have called the game Castlevania Acolytes of Satan, and people would have understood that it's supposed to be a sequel to Lords of Shadow. But anyway, Zobek suggests that we chase after the head of a major pharmaceutical company first. So onward to Biochemic? I think that's how you're supposed to say that. Onward to Biochemic Corporation. Look at this slick industrial facility. Very Castlevania. Not at all inspired by Kojima. Not in the slightest. We also get to see the new gameplay mechanic of form changing. Our first form is rats. This is actually kind of cool. It reminds me of the rat maps on Counter-Strike, and this can be used to add some creativity to level design. Here we get introduced to a new game mechanic, the Shadow Daggers. They can be used to stab people, but like the last game. But they can also be used to flip switches, like the last game. We also get introduced to the concept of enemy possession. This is crucial to doing some of the puzzles later in the game. After making our way through, we run into a biochem team led by Marilyn Manson. She pulls a crazy and breaks the glass, releasing some form of biotoxin that apparently goes through their PPE. They should have been wearing the mask. The team then turns into hideous monsters that challenge Dracul. Marilyn then descends upon the metal floor and starts hitting you with electric shocks and her actual whip. She has one. This boss fight was incredibly easy, but I started the game out on the easiest difficulty. With the OG Lords of Shadow, I bumped it up a notch. After beating her, she opens a portal and teleports everybody back to this facility in downtown. This downtown area is quite nice. We can ride the elevator down to the City of the Damned. City of the Damned. Only Satan himself would build a city here, but hey, maybe that's the point. We also get this cool glitch lady that Dracul somehow mistakes for Maria? Why do I feel like this is a Kojima creation? Anyway. We run into this blood pool with an Orcan Meta Knight and minions bathing. This guy took some attention paying. It took me a few minutes to figure out that you're supposed to make him dash into a section of wall and smack him while his head is stuck. And he always gets his head stuck. After beating him up, we meet with the Spirit Wolf. The Spirit Wolf. The wolf will sometimes guide you to the right spot, but I got to relying more on going towards unexplored areas of the map later on in the game. After having to fight these guys in a gas chamber and get this annoying chupacabra to the other side of the cliff, plus more questing, we get to fight this three-headed monstrosity. This fight is really easy to do, especially as the game feeds you directions. We then run into this chupacabra shop. Out of nowhere. This fella is ripping me off. I know he is, but there are no other competing shops anywhere, so what are you gonna do? Right afterwards, we get introduced to these Kleidos runes. If you collect 4 of them, you can take them back to the shop for a challenge, but these are optional, and I, of course, didn't do them. We're back in Patrick Stewart's building, and he tunes us into a news broadcast. Monsters are taking over the city! They kept this lady from the lab trapped here. We get more expo about the virus, too. After fighting our way through downtown, we get into this hospital. I ran into a glitch here, though. Some software switch in the game didn't flip when it was supposed to, and I couldn't progress past this door. Just couldn't do it. This door was supposed to open and it didn't. Reloading from a checkpoint fixed the problem, though. More questing through the Sciences District. This tram section's pretty sweet. After going back through the Sciences District, we get on this train. One of the better Assassin's Creed-esque parts of the game, plus the enemy fights here are great. Our boy Zobek's minion joins in at Victory Plaza. After going through the canals and sewers of Victory Plaza, we meet up with the boy, who triggers a flashback? A dream sequence? In this sequence, we meet this lady, who corrupts Dracul's blood. Not good. Fighting her minions is pretty easy. Then we get to meet the new Murray. Dracul keeps being rough with her, denying that he has been Gabriel Belmont in the past. We also find out that Dracul's old stomping grounds have become hostile to him. He wants to leave, giving us incentive to keep playing the game. The witch's hunt is not over yet, though. She makes us go through this puzzle fight. This puzzle fight consists of hiding from her, and we'll get to do this puzzle again later in the game. It's the second phase of the fight that's cool, though. She has these magic discs that spin around her at such a rapid rate. They're metal, though, so you can punch them with your Chaos Magic fists and break them. The minions, though, are very annoying, but all minions are. This elevator puzzle, though, pissed me off right here. This is what it is. These elevators don't work unless there's electricity, and of course, they didn't pay their bill on time, so it's intermittent service. There is a switch in the basement that turns on the electricity. So I turn on that switch, go up to the second floor. Of course, the way to the third floor is busted. you gotta take the elevator to go to the 3rd floor. The problem is there's no switch for the electricity on the 2nd floor. I spent 25 minutes looking for this non-existent switch. So what you have to do is do this maniacal run thing where you flip the switch, go to the elevator that goes to the 2nd floor, and then run through the grate, mist through the other grate, and then hit the elevator to the 3rd floor before the electricity goes out. Very annoying. Once we pass that section, though, we possess our way to the lab and get a shot for the demon lady that's being held. This shot increases her power and gives her the power to explode Patrick Stewart's building. She gained in size and power, and the fight here is nothing too ridiculous. Standard arena battle, just smack her until she's dead. This Overlook architecture is pretty sweet. After the Overlook Tower, we run into our old buddy, Guardian of the Lake of Oblivion. He has been ensconced in this tower thing. But the thing is this Pieces of a Mirror puzzle is balls. You can't make a single noise. The fellow that's guarding the graveyard has hypersensitive hearing. Instant death if you make one single noise. And we also have these leaves in very unfortunately placed areas. So you have to use your mist form to go across the leaf sections. It's a very annoying puzzle. We're then told by the boy to try our hand at the Toy Maker's Shooting Gallery. This part is alright, but I never got the point of these challenges, if it's all auto-aim anyway. Now we're on to what's supposed to be the WoW puzzle of the game. This theatrical production. I was wowed alright. I always thought Castlevania was maxed out on culture already, but hey, here you go. The idea is that you pick the right characters and set pieces to finish the play. After finishing the play, he falls down from the ceiling, he being the playmaster, the play orchestrator, with this giant contraption, only to break it and reveal this set of armor. Nothing special here, just beat down to get to phase 2, then beat down to get past phase 2, then beat down to get past phase 3. After phase 3, he gives us a mirror piece. After this, we get teleported back to Zobek's office again for our next briefing. The next mission is finding about who is looking for you. They're in the old church. Thanks, Zobek. On the way, we have our first encounter with the steampunk robot riot police. Yep, you heard that right. Steampunk robot riot police. In a Castlevania game. It's so out there that it's almost worth a Castlevania trope -1. They are fun to fight, though, I do have to admit. You basically enact that chaos magic to fire punch his shield until it breaks, and then you hit him until he explodes. Castlevania game! Ah, wait, there's a bigger version of the Riot Police. The Steampunk ED-209. The -1 has been redacted. So, we parkour our way through the chapel, which is conveniently under renovation. We go through the library. Yep, there's a library in this one too. And at the end of the library, we run into not Ezio from the Assassin's Creed games. He functions as a nice transition to the next boss, whatever we call this thing. His weak spot is his stomach. Keep hitting it until he's dead. Standard arena fight. He'll also dig his arms underground and do this spike attack under you. Quite annoying, but easy to dodge if you're paying attention. At last, we meet the hooded man. The not Ezio fella. The first phase of this fight is just getting his health bar down to 0. The next phase, after he gets gigantic, is cutting down these stone totems that are powering him. Then he pulls out his dark crystal. Against us! How dare he? Does he know who we are? Seriously. Anyway, it was pretty cool to see Dracul take down the monster that killed everybody in the first game. That was freaking sweet. Not Ezio reveals himself to be Victor Belmont. Sweet. Our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson. He was gonna help out with leading us to the next boss, but he got killed by this living statue thing. Our lineage paid the price, though. My boy, he gone. Press F. Also, as it turns out, Victor had a piece of the Mirror of Fate, so there you go. The boy can finally put the Mirror of Fate together so Dracul can... Wait a minute. No! Who's this monstrosity?
All of your worst traits, don't you think? Who the hell are you? I am the blood that runs through your veins.
Oh, wait, seriously? Are we seriously doing this?
Chills the hearts of men as you pass. I am the fury, your hate and your vengeance. I am your destiny.
We are literally fighting our inner darkness.
He doesn't
Stoop. Oddly enough, this fight proved to be quite awesome. You get the health bar down to almost 0, and then gain a new power in the middle of the fight. You gotta use this new double jump power to get up to his head. His only vulnerable spot now. After this, you Chaos Bomb the inner head. So, there you go. Now, Marie reunites with her kid, and the boy teleports us back to where Victor Belmont died. The second acolyte is in this 1800s-era weapons manufacturing facility that somehow is still standing. Fortunately, he's only 2 easy puzzles away. He gives life to the statues that happen to be in the area, giving us 3 distinct beasts to fight. Castlevania Trope +1, anybody remember Castlevania 2 and also the Colosseum part of Symphony of the Night? Same thing. He takes this opportunity to flee them. We get a flashback with the boy, giving us a morale boost and the obvious thing to do after the fight's over.
When this is over, choose your family.
Zobek briefs us on the third acolyte in the Basilica of the City. I haven't heard the word Basilica in a minute, so there you go. We kill him so that everyone gets eternal peace. This starting puzzle was balls, though. You have to flip the platforms in time while watching out for yourself, and the fireball sequences are very annoying, and the patterns also flip. So, like, it's all very, very annoying, but I had to push through because I felt like we were almost going to beat the game. So there you go. I solved it by chance. I'm not going to say it was skill at all. But just before heading into the Basilica, we relive all the boss fights we did. I am actually playing the game here. I'm not watching a cutscene. So now we're standing in a clouded void being introduced to... Alucard? Yes, Trevor, the boy, died a long time ago and was reborn as Alucard. This, of course, flies directly in the lore of the original game because Alucard fought alongside Trevor in Castlevania 2, but hey, this is a reboot, so they're allowed to twist the lore a little bit. I don't think he's a Damphir this time around, though. Full-on vampire, so that's a little different. Dracul recounts the summary of the first game,
Of course.
but Alucard hashes a scheme to draw the evil from the underworld. All Dracul has to do is fake death for a few hundred years, then bango! Dracul wakes up and slays Satan. Alucard also reveals himself as Zobek's right-hand man, or as I called him, Zobek's boy. So, nice job, Alucard. So, after this meeting, and after this stabbing,
It's been a long journey.
a few hundred years later, we get to meet the Dark Priest, Shaft, presumably.
I understand.
Well, thankfully he understands, because I don't.
Where has he gone?
I don't know. That language is unknown to me.
Zobek!
It's ancient Enochian. The language of Satan. Miserable traitors!
He's suffering a boomer moment. He thought we were trying to summon Satan. So he reveals his true form, Death.
May you and your spawn be damned forever! And the only interest you're concerned with is the one you'll get on my money after you put me away! Well, nobody is putting me anywhere! I'm not some old piece of furniture! And there is nothing wrong with me!
The first phase of this boss fight includes getting his health bar down to 0. Standard boss fight, he has a pretty ridiculous whip that blocks a lot of things. Then, you have to slay the beasts that he summoned and hit his statues with the Chaos Bomb. You then need to mist your way through the Bone Shield to kill him. While freezing him, he drops the whip from the first game that could have killed you permanently. Dracul and Alucard separate to find the third acolyte. Dracul is still going to go through the Basilica. After reaching the Basilica, we find Shaft summoning Satan. And then Satan kills Shaft because... why not? Then, after a heated exchange, Satan summons a Leviathan. Taking this Leviathan down includes pulling some chains, hopping across his body, pulling chains at the other end, which makes his head explode. 'Cause why not? For the second phase, Satan takes possession of Alucard, strong-arming you into the moral dilemma of killing your own son. That'll make the second time Trevor died. Guy can't seem to get a break. Understandably so, this is the toughest boss fight of the game. Took me 20 minutes to do this fight. It's ridiculous. Now, this final cutscene is very, very dramatic. And a lot happens, so you gotta pay attention. Dracul attempts to kill his son. Satan yeets himself out of Alucard to avoid dying. Dracul drives through the whip. Dracul drives the whip through his heart anyway. Dracul drains some of his own blood on the Alucard to restore him. Alucard says the sun is rising. Dracul looks into the mirror of fate, pulverizes it, and then delivers this classic.
Who knows what fate has in store?
And there you go. Kind of a weak ending. Also, plenty of sequel baiting. I mean, what more of a freeform ending can you have? In conclusion, what do I think about these games? When I started playing Lords of Shadow, I really didn't like it. It felt too much like other video games. My brain kept racing to try to start the hashtag #NotMyCastlevania on Twitter. But as I kept playing, the new and old Castlevania lore pulled me in, and I wound up actually enjoying the game, starting with around the first death of the Lord of Shadow. There was actually never a dull moment in Lords of Shadow 2, since the entire game was so over the top and moved faster. So as a whole, I enjoyed that game more. Plenty of fodder to make fun of in both games, though. So play it for a good game, or play it to make fun of. Either way, you're gonna have a good time. And thank God, this Castlevania review is over.